המרחם על כל בריאותיו וייחוס ויחמון ורחם הנפש רוח ושמה של נפטר בשם טוב מן העולם, סבי רבי יעקב ביטון. כל האחרונה לכן בגן עדן הוא בכל בצמחים ובכל החרמים סדרות וכן יהי רצון ולומר אמן. Today's class is dedicated by my parents, Ilun Nishmat, my mother's father, my grandfather, Rabbi Yaakov Bitton. We're on page Kuf Tzadivav. Every year in Elul, we take these 4 weeks and we study something related to Teshuvah. And I'll tell you the truth, is usually, even if you study Teshuvah for many different books, you'll run out of information to talk about when it comes to Teshuvah. Not because Teshuvah is so easy, but because Teshuvah is something that is, all those who discuss it are essentially repeating over and over the same things. So, when you are learning about Teshuvah, it's hard not to be repetitive. That's really the problem. And so when I was thinking, what could I learn, what could we study, there were a few ideas that went through my mind. Some were less practical than others, some time wouldn't allow. Some, in order to understand the conversation being had, I would have to do one of those things where I do 25 introductions to the shiur, and then Elul would already be next year's Elul. So I have to balance all of those things. I settled on something that to me I felt was very practical, something that is relevant, something that we might walk away with from a new understanding of Teshuvah, and something that we're not going to finish today. But we have, Baruch Hashem, the coming weeks, and for those of you who are here in person, but next week we'll be in Texas or wherever else, there's always Zoom. By the way, it's my dear childhood friend, Zachariah Morrow, Zach Morrow, grew up right here. We used to run these hallways together as little kids, up and down these hallways, getting screamed at by business owners and kids program directors and things like that. But Baruch Hashem, it's a zechut to have him with us here. Rabbi Chaim David Halevy is being asked a fantastic question. And the question is not just about Teshuvah, as much as the question is, how does Teshuvah work? What is the mechanism of Teshuvah? I'll explain the question in just a moment. Let's first read together. Kuf Tzadivav. Rabbi Chaim David Halevy, the chief rabbi of Tel Aviv Yafo, Alav Shalom, one of the greatest Chachamim in his time, a special Sephardic thinker. He was intentionally erased from contemporary Sephardic history due to the clan-like families that operate in today's Sephardic community. More than that, I can't say on camera. More than that, I can't say in the month of Elul. So for right now. Teshuvah. Mipnei mahi mo'ila u'mchaperet. How does it work? Why does it work? Dorenu chai et teshuvah befoal. We are in a generation which is living Teshuvah, actively. So Teshuvah is not just something that people do once a year. Teshuvah is something that has really become the face of the Jewish community. Nitan likol ledorenu dor teshuvah. You could even call our generation the generation of Teshuvah. You have more people today doing Teshuvah than likely we ever had, at least since the time of maybe Chizkiyahu. I'm thinking Haman. We said that all of the prophets were unsuccessful in their attempts to get the Jewish people to cling to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The one person who was able to rally the Jewish people around HaKadosh Baruch Hu was Haman. What Haman did with his evil decree, generations and generations of Nevi'im, of prophets, could not accomplish. We live in a generation where people all around us come from families where yesterday Shmirat Shabbat was not a thing, Kashrut was not a thing, study of the Torah was not part of life, and in a generation where, Baruch Hashem, that's changing rapidly. We're living in the Teshuvah generation. Uvihizdamnut acheret, and in another occasion, kvar amadnu al kach, I've already discussed as Rabbi Chaim David Halevy, shezeh echad misimanei hageulah hamuvhakim, that this is one of the clear signs that we're living in a generation of redemption. That the Jewish people are returning back to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Not just going back to Israel, not just getting Yerushalayim. There's part of watching Am Yisrael actively engage in Teshuvah that tells us that this is a sign of the redemption. He discusses this elsewhere, maybe for another year. ולכן, and therefore, זה דור שמעורר שאלות ובעיות רבות בכל שטחי החיים הדתיים. This generation has therefore come up with numerous new questions that other generations haven't had to ask, new religious questions. Yesterday I was trying to help a couple with Shalom Bayit. Not from here. She's a Talmidah of mine for a long time. Him, not so much. When discussing, his head was stuck in a certain place. This is the Torah, this is the way things are done, we never change, tradition, tradition, tradition. Now, yeah, that's true in certain things, but not in other things. For example, not in the relationship between a husband and a wife. I can tell that many things have changed in the last 100 years between husbands and wives. Many positive, many negative. The ones I'm talking about are positive changes. And a person wishes to live in a generation of negativity. The Torah says that a woman will live with her eyes always on her husband, desiring him. And what about him? What's his job? What's it? V'hu yimshol? V'hu yimshol ba. He will rule over her. He will reign over her. Most people think there's some biblical mitzvah here for a man to rule over his wife. And so they're very makpidim, they're very strict on this abuse of their spouses. What they don't realize is not only is it not one of the mitzvot, this is a curse. It's literally a curse. The world is cursed in that which men rule over women. The rebalancing of that is something very important. I don't know if we're going to balance it so much that soon we're going to have another problem. But for right now, this is not a negative progression in history, this is a positive thing. You can't tell me you want to live in the curse of Adam HaRishon. And if you understand what I'm talking about, you understand what I'm talking about. One question that is being asked, because so many people are doing Teshuvah, is, I've been asked this by many people, Rabbi Chaim David Halevy used to have a radio show, on the radio station. It was called Aseh L'Charav, Make for Yourself a Rabbi. In that station, you could ask Rabbi Chaim David Halevy questions. I don't want to tell you what year Rabbi Chaim David Halevy died. You can look it up yourself. You can ask yourself which radio stations you were listening to until the year he died, and then feel bad. I was asked by about Teshuvah, says Rabbi Chaim David Halevy, how does Teshuvah work? Quote, I know how many averot I did in my past, and there were a lot of them. I once met a guy in Yerushalayim. He told me he grew up Hasidic. Now he was in yeshiva in Israel for about Teshuvah, and he told me, Rabbi, I did every single avera in the Torah. I told him, I don't think so, but maybe a lot of them. I don't think he could do all of them, but maybe a lot of them. He did a lot of averot. So he did averot. Uvayom bahir echad, and on one clear day, kasher ichlattiti lachazor b'teshuvah, when I decided to do teshuvah, v'shiniti dorach chaim, I changed my lifestyle. Naaseti l'divrei rosh hayeshiva sheli l'tzadik gamur. In the words of my rosh yeshiva, I became a completely righteous tzaddik. You know what the Gemara says? B'makom she'balei teshuvah umdim. They're in a place where balei teshuvah stand. Even the most righteous tzaddikim can't stand there. By the way, there's a Gemara that argues in the same section, the other way around. In a place where tzaddikim gemurim stand, I don't know why we always stick to one and not the other. I guess this one makes us feel good, as balei teshuvah, all of us. If I can maybe give you a more rational explanation of this. What a tzaddik gamur experiences is much less than that of a balei teshuvah. The perspective that he has of the world, that a balei teshuvah sees, he knows both sides of the aisle, knows things that others don't, has experienced things and chosen to do teshuvah from them. A tzaddik gamur has never stood in those places, does not have that perspective. He said, but now I became a tzaddik gamur. Haytachen, how did that happen? How did I become a tzaddik gamur? What did I do? I just decided one day to do teshuvah. V'hechan ne'elmu kol otam chataim rabim shechatati. And what exactly happened to all of those chataim that to borrow the word of someone I spoke to yesterday, all the averot that I put into the universe? I don't know what that means actually. What I can tell you though is, what happened to all those averot that I did? So where did they go? They disappeared now? What happened to them? How exactly do you erase an avera? Can you imagine if this would be the court system of today? Where someone goes to court, you know what? I murdered that person. Okay, Yana, go home. Wonderful. Go wear a white robe, eat some apples and honey. Good for you. Can you imagine if that's the way the court system worked? What kind of dysfunctional society would we have? I remember watching a video once. What was it called? The Godfather. A long time ago. And over there you have people, these mafia bosses, they're killing people right and left, dropping bodies in the Hudson River, and then going to the priest and saying, forgive me, Father, if I have sinned. Okay, a few Hail Marys, Shalom, HaShamayim. Right, that's the end of the story. How do you kill somebody and then go to church and then tell the priest and then, yeah, okay, great. Do this, do that, and go home. Imagine if this world worked like HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Bedin. Umadua Bedin Shelmala Shonehu Bedino. And if it's so dysfunctional down here, why is this considered a functional model for HaKadosh Baruch Hu up above? Meaning, how did my Teshuvah work? Where did my Averot go? And is this really a good model? Shela zot atika noshnahi. Rabbi Chaim says it's a very old question. It's not a new question. V'yafeh higdira harav bal sefer ha'ikarim. Who wrote the book Sefer ha'ikarim? Somebody in my room or my Zoom call has to know who wrote the book Sefer ha'ikarim. Okay, someone use your phone and Google who wrote the book Sefer ha'ikarim.
Rabbi Albo?
Very good.
I didn't hear your first one.
He what?
No, I didn't hear at first the question, so I was a little confused.
I was surprised that you didn't know.
Then I looked at the page and I read it from there. I figured that's what you were talking about.
That is exactly who I'm talking about. Rabbi Yosef Albo was born in 1380 and died in 1444. He was a Spanish philosopher. He wrote a book, Sefer ha'ikarim, the book of principles of Jewish faith. It's a very important work. I have no idea if this book is available in English. Does anyone know if there's an English Sefer ha'ikarim? Could be you should check Sefaria. Could be there exists such a thing. This book is one of the most important books of Jewish philosophy that we have. Rabbi Yosef Albo. Says Rabbi Yosef Albo categorized Teshuvah very nicely when he said in the fourth essay, chapter 27 of Sefer ha'ikarim, Harei ze domeh lemi shesatar habayit befo'al. Teshuvah is like a person who destroyed somebody's building with their own hands. V'chozer u'boneh oto befiv. And then he comes back to build the building with his mouth. How do you destroy a building with your hands? And then you say something and boom, the building is standing up again. One of the most,
I don't know, you ask a building team.
with their mouth? With their words? One of the most important things that I tell my children, there are certain things that you do wrong that Abba and Ima are not able to fix. Some things we can fix. You spilled the milk on the floor, I can fix that. You broke a plate, maybe I can't fix it, doesn't matter, put it in the trash. I'll buy a new one. Tell me something I can't fix, Al-Khanan. If Chas v'Shalom we hurt each other, siblings can hurt each other in a way that Abba and Ima can't fix. A person can grow up and do a crime. The police get involved. Abba and Ima can't fix it. There are things we can't fix, though. How can a person do something wrong and then fix it with their words? In halakha, you have this phenomenon. The phenomenon is when you do a certain action. So, for example, a man gets married to a woman. How does he get married to a woman? Bekesef, shtar, ubiyah. There are actions that are done. And therefore, when certain chachamim suggested that we can undo a marriage through words, there were certain hopes to free agunot, whatever else it might be. The mechanism of I cannot uproot an action with a word exists in halakha. Words can't uproot, actions can uproot actions, words can uproot words, but words cannot uproot actions. So then we have to make other clauses and ketubot and other things and all of the solutions that were suggested. My only suggestion, and it's not above my pay grade, the story of the agunot. My feeling is if all of the rabbis are convinced that none of these solutions work, that's their prerogative, but they don't have the right to keep waiting any longer to come up with another solution that works. You can say, I don't like this one, I don't like that one, but you can't say, I don't like this, I don't like that, so I'm not going to do anything. This problem is a major problem, it's not a little problem, it's a major problem. It's been a problem for over 150 years. since Batei Din have stopped being able to compel men to give gitin. And I would tell a person today that it's a liability to allow one's daughter to get married with a chuppah v'kiddushin without something else in place to protect their child. I hate to say that. It's not nice that I have to say that, but that's a reality. So we cannot have something that is an action that is fixed by words. How can it be that you do teshuvah? All these other what you do, all of a sudden, chatati, aviti, pashati, and I'm done, no more. How does teshuvah work? So let's look here in the next section. חטאים תרדף רעה, ואומנם כך היא מידת הדין, לפי דברי רבותינו. This is the letter of the law, according to our rabbis. Let's understand, according to the letter of the law, מידת הדין. כי דרשתם על הפסוק בתהילים, like our rabbis דרשה on תהילים 25:8, טוב ישר אדוני, על כן יורה חטאים בדרך. What does that mean? HaKadosh Baruch Hu is good, and therefore He guides the evil people in the way of what? The ways of Teshuvah. He's good. Meaning it's not something he has to do, it's something he chooses to do. HaKadosh Baruch Hu could say, listen, you're a Rasha, you did something wrong, die. Instead, what does he do? Instead, he says, I'm going to help you figure out Teshuvah. Shalu lechokhmah. They asked wisdom, chokhmah. Choteh ma'onsho. Somebody who sins, what's his deal? What's going to happen to him? What's his punishment? Amar lahem, wisdom quoted a pasuk in Mishle 13. Chataim teradef ra. What will happen to evil people? Hey, we know Mishle? Bad things will happen to chataim, and then there continues that tzaddikim, good things will happen to them. Meaning, if someone does a chet, they deserve all the bad thing that happens their way. Shalu nevuah, they asked prophecy, choteh ma'onsho. What is the punishment of a sinner? Amar lahem, she quoted to them prophecy, the verse of Yecheskel, who says, "Hanefesh hachotet hitamut." The soul of the sinner shall die. By the way, that pasuk, do you remember the context of the pasuk? It's telling you there that only the soul of the sinner shall die, but that HaKadosh Baruch Hu does not continue the averot on children and grandchildren of the person who does something wrong. Familiar, there are two contradictory verses in our Torah, correct? One that says that children will suffer till the third generation, the fourth generation of the actions of their fathers. And then one pasuk that says, no, they won't die. So what is it? What do Chachamim answer? When they follow in the ways of their forefathers, then they're like their forefathers. So they'll receive not just their own punishment, but some that left over, the credit that their parents do, they still owe. But somebody who's a tzaddik, then they don't suffer at all. The two different types of people the pasuk is talking about. Shalu the Torah. They asked the Torah, Choteh ma'onsho. What is the consequence for a sinner? But if you're going to study this piece of Haggadah, you have to ask, why does Chokhmah answer this? Why does Nivuah answer that? Why does the Torah? But I don't have to answer that, no? Amar lehem yavi Hasham v'yitkaper lo. You should bring a sacrifice and it'll be forgiven. Shalu la'kadosh baruch hu. They asked the Kadosh Baruch Hu, ma onsho? What is the consequence? What is the punishment of somebody who sins? Amar lehem ya'aseh teshuvah v'yitkaper lo. He should do teshuvah and he'll be forgiven. היינו דכתיב על כן יורה חטאים בדרך. יורה לחטאים דרך לעשות תשובה. זה ירושלמי במסכת מכות. That's what it means that HaKadosh Baruch Hu guides the evil on the path of teshuvah. That he will show the evil people that there is a way to teshuvah, there's a way to become good, and that is by doing teshuvah. So the first three, wisdom, prophecy, what do they want from the choteh? They wanted him to die. What did the Torah want? Should bring a sacrifice. What did HaKadosh Baruch Hu want? He should do teshuvah. This fits in what the prophets tell us. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Lama li rov zivchachem. I don't want your sacrifices. I don't need. All I want is for you to return from your evil ways. It's the flip side. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is not looking for sacrifices. He's looking to guide people on the path of teshuvah. What's the point of this, Midrash? What's it telling us? It's an Agadah. What's the point of it? No, what's the point of this section we just read?
To show that by Midat Adin, Chotim got consequences. That it's only Hashem's merit, love for us, that He gives us a way to remove the Chotim.
Very good. So we're establishing the basis that a person who does wrong deserves the consequences that is coming to them, that are coming to them. When a person does Teshuvah, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is changing the way the world is supposed to work. And saying, even though you admitted to what you did wrong, it's because of that I'm going to allow you to do Teshuvah and you won't receive any consequence at all.
When you make a law, and somebody breaks the law, the only guy who can fix it is the lawmaker, who can say, okay, I'm forgetting about that.
If somebody made a law that you can't murder, who can let him off the hook for that law?
I'm not sure if Teshuvah can let him off the hook.
That's right, we're going to talk about that at the end. Meaning, not every mitzvah you could just say, you did Teshuvah, it's over. Which mitzvahs, for example, you can?
Things that you hurt on another person.
Things you hurt other people. Now we're going to talk about that all the way to the end of this whole series of classes. We're going to talk about mitzvot ben adam l'chavero. For right now, we're ben adam l'makom. Is there somebody there? Yeah. Maybe we'll close the door. V'chen darshu al pasuk b'Yechezkel. And that's what our rabbis taught us in the pasuk in Yechezkel. Videi adam mitachat kanfehem. And the hands are underneath their wings. Whose wings? The kiruvim. But if you look at the Torah, it doesn't actually say yadav, it says yado. What does it mean? Yado ktiv, zeu yado shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is the hand of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shepurusa tachat kanfei hachayot, which is spread out under the chayot. Now, what are kiruvim, and what are chayot, and what are ofanim, and what are seraphim? This is not within the scope of today's shiur. It's also a little bit above my pay grade. So there are definitely books I can recommend you look at, but it's not within the scope of today's conversation. HaKadosh Baruch Hu's hand is underneath the angels. Why? What difference does it make if HaKadosh Baruch Hu has one hand or two hands? Meaning, he doesn't have hands. So who cares if it's one hand or two hands? Okay. One day we study this Haggadah on its own. Why is HaKadosh Baruch Hu's hand underneath the angels? Kedei lekabel ba'alei teshuvah mipnei midat adin. To snatch up the ba'alei teshuvah before midat adin gets to them. Before judgment gets to a ba'al teshuvah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is there to snatch them up and save them from the judgment that is coming. Upiresh Rashi, and Rashi explains, midat adin shemekatreget ve'omeret lo tekabelehem. There's a midat adin which is saying, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, don't accept this person, they did averot. Vehu mekabelam baseter. And what does HaKadosh Baruch Hu do? He takes them in secretly, privately. ועד כמה שקשים הדברים להבנת שכלנו הפשוט. So Rabbi Chaim even though this is an Haggadah, and a simple understanding is not going to do it justice. דברי רבותינו ברורים הם, it's still, the meaning of our rabbis is clear. But that once again, שמידת הדין מקטרגת ומונעת קבלת חוטאים בתשובה, טרם יבואו על העונשם המגיע להם. That מידת הדין saves those who are doing teshuvah from the justified, proper consequence they should deserve. So once again, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is getting in the way of the order of the world and saving Ba'alei Teshuvah from whatever should happen to them because of the chataim that they did. Meaning that we do. I'm talking about all of us. Od matzanu b'divrei rabotenu. We have yet another teaching of our rabbis. Al mikra amur b'Menashe, but a verse that is said about Menashe. Who wants to tell me about Menashe? Who was Menashe?
He was a criminal, was the worst king of Jewish people.
He was a serious rasha.
The one who killed the prophets.
Menashe did a lot of things. Tell me who his father was.
It's not a problem.
You're thinking, I think, of Achab.
No, that's what.
Yeah?
The Ash, I believe, no?
I thought you meant
His father, who?
Yeah. Chizkiah was
Chizkiyahu HaMelech, very good. Remember, Chizkiyahu HaMelech didn't want to have children. So Shayahu comes to him and says, you have to have children. But I don't want to have children. I know what's going to happen if I have a child. And he says, you do what you need to do. HaKadosh Baruch Hu will do what he has to do. Menashe causes the Jewish people to serve Avodah Zarah in unprecedented fashion. It's you read his life and you're just... Remember the story in the Gemara, one of our Chachamim, he said, tomorrow we're going to talk about our friend Menashe, meaning in a disrespectful tone. And he said that night Menashe came to him in a dream. He said, who do you think you are that you can call me Menashe? Am I your friend? I'm a king. And he tells him, come on, I'm a chacham. Who are you? You're a oved avodah zarah. And he tells him, if you lived in my generation, you'd be tripping over your robe to go run to worship avodah zarah. You'd be lifting up your robe to run as fast. The yetzer hara for avodah zarah was so strong that you would be even worse than I was. So here by Menashe, kasher tsar lo, vayikana me'od mipnei Elohei avotav. There's a certain point where he submits to the God of his forefathers. Vayitpalel elav, and he prays to him. V'yatar lo, and he beseeches him. Vayishma techinato, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu listens to his prayer. This is in Divrei Hayamim. The Gemara tells us in Masechet Sanhedrin, V'amar Rabbi Yochanan b'shem Rashbi. Rabbi Yochanan says in the name of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, Mai dichtiv. What does it mean that it says Vayishma elav? What does it say there? See that word? It should say V'yater lo. Instead it says Vayichater lo. Or you could say Vayachter lo. But I think it should be read Vayichater. I'll tell you why. V'yater lo mibayele. מכאן שהנוסחה בפני רבי שמעון בן יוחאי הייתה ויחתר לו בחטא. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai had a version of Divrei Hayamim, which instead of the word V'yater lo, it said Vayichater lo. Instead of he beseeched him, it says that he, no, Yater is that he, no, V'yater is the word in English. Is to, oh, there's a word.
Answer the response positively to him.
There's a word. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu listened to him. Yeah, there's a word I'm thinking that's not in my mind right now. So instead of that, Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai has a version. No, that he dug a tunnel for him. What do you mean dug a tunnel for him? Milamed she'asa lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu k'min machteret barakia. HaKadosh Baruch Hu made him like a tunnel in the heavens. To bring him to him in Teshuvah and save him from Midat Adin. Who is HaKadosh Baruch Hu saving from Midat Adin? Who?
Evil guy.
The worst king in the world.
Oh, yeah.
The worst king. He prays. What does HaKadosh Baruch Hu do? He said, now I was going to teach you, actually, I was debating. Pachad Yitzchak is a book of Rabbi Shem Tov Gagin, the one who wrote the Keter Shem Tov, the chief rabbi of the Spanish-Portuguese community in London, in Manchester, and Ramsgate. My UK class is dedicated much to his writings. They just put out recently from the handwritten manuscripts that his family supplied a set of drashot on Parashat Shavua, on holidays, things like that. There's a whole section here about why tefillah works and how teshuvah works and why slichot work, and touches on these topics over here. So Menashe prays after doing all this evil, and what does the HaKadosh Baruch Hu do, says Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai? He makes a tunnel in heaven. What's the purpose of the tunnel? To save him from the consequences of Midat Adin. Upiresh Rashi, and Rashi explains, Midat Adin hayta me'akevet shelo le'akbil pnei Menashe b'teshuvah. Midat Adin was holding back Menashe from allowing him his teshuvah to be acceptable. Can every person do teshuvah? Yes. Is all teshuvah accepted? No. No. Right? There's more than that. If you remember, when I taught you about Yeshu in the Talmud, Yeshu does averot. And then he causes other people to do averot. And when his rabbi, Rabbi Yoshua ben Perachia, comes to save him, he says, come do teshuvah. What does Yeshu answer him? Do you remember?
You taught us that there's no...
Very good. You taught us, Rabbi, that one who sins can do teshuvah. But one who caused other people to sin, en misapkin biyadon la'asot teshuvah. We usually translate that as they don't allow him to do teshuvah. I saw in the writings of the Lubavitcher Rebbe Alav Shalom, based off a section of the Tanya, he has a book called Biurim Leperkei Avot. In there he writes, what does it mean en misapkin biyado? We know that when a person does teshuvah, HaKadosh Baruch Hu helps a person do teshuvah. What does it say? If you open up for me, if If you open up for me an opening like the pin of a needle, the eye of a needle, ani iftach lachem kiputcho shel ulam. I'll open up for you the doors as wide as that of the ulam in the Beit HaMikdash. Meaning, you just do a little bit, I'll do the rest. This is called misapkin biyado. Rav Kook explains in Orot Teshuvah something interesting. He says, when you're walking in the dark and there's lightning, and so it's dark, you can't see anything, but all of a sudden there's lightning, what do you see? You see everything. For how long? For a moment, but why does it help you? Yeah, you kind of know where to go, like which direction at least to head until the next lightning bolt, and then you get more clarity. He says Teshuvah works the same way. A person is in the dark. They're in the dark of Chata'im. If it wasn't for HaKadosh Baruch Hu sending lightning bolts, we wouldn't even know where to find the entrance to the Teshuvah. The lightning bolts that come into your mind, those moments of clarity that come to you, I need to fix my life, they disappear very quickly. But those are opportunities that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is putting in your path. That's what it means, Misapkin Biyado. A person like Yeshu, who has caused others to do averot, of course his teshuvah is accepted. But it means that HaKadosh Baruch Hu no longer provides opportunities to this person to do teshuvah. They have to find their own way. The divine inspiration that is given to a person is gone. Now, I will say that Rav Kook left in his will that whoever prints the book Orot Teshuvah should print it in bright colors. My father got a gift of Orot Teshuvah when he was a young man, and it's a very ugly yellow color. I can't tell you how. It's like if you took that orange juice and turned it into a color. Like, I don't know. It's a strange color. And many of you have seen the older Rav Kook books. All of the books are white, but this one Orot Teshuvah, it's like bam, it comes out because you want it to be bright. Lately, they printed an edition. I have in my home also. It's a beautiful, metallic blue. I like that. That looks good. The idea was that the Teshuvah is supposed to be something that is, maybe it wasn't Rav Kook, maybe it was his son who said to print the book this way. Now I'm thinking. But the idea is supposed to remind you of this lightning bolt that you have. So here, what happens? Menashe is given an opportunity, but Midat Adin is saying, don't accept this Teshuvah. He doesn't deserve to do Teshuvah. ועשה הקדוש ברוך הוא מחתרת ברקיע, and הקדוש ברוך הוא made a tunnel in the heavens, ופשט ידו, וקיבלו בלא ידיעת מידת הדין. And he accepts him without the knowledge, let's read, without the permission of מידת הדין. Yeah, הקדוש ברוך הוא is again bypassing the system. Who is מידת הדין? מידת הדין is הקדוש ברוך הוא. There's no elements that fight God in heaven. But מידת הדין means it goes against what should be. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is doing, though, what he wants to do. What do we say in Ha'azinu? El emunah ven aven tzaddik v'yasharhu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is a God of justice. There's nothing unjust in front of him. What does it mean a God who is just and does no injustice? Ever happened to you that you do something, let's say, you're driving your car, a police officer pulls you over. Why? You were doing 70 miles an hour on a 65 mile an hour highway. And driving past you are 15 other cars that are doing 90 miles an hour. What's the gut reaction a person tells a police officer? Why are you stopping me? Look at all those people. It's a deflection of sorts. Why are you looking at me? Look at them. What does it have to do with anything? I was telling you now. Justice. Very good. Thank you. Justice. Thank you. I understand. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu stops only one person and lets all the other ones go, it's an injustice to the person who got stopped. They were, during COVID, the Kehillat was closed. Someone said, you gotta let me in. I said, if I let you in, then all the people that don't let in, what about them? How are they going to feel? There's certain things that you have to be just. You have to be fair. So if HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to let a Rasha do Teshuvah, and therefore not suffer a consequence, what does that mean for all the people that are suffering the consequences? It's an injustice. This, by the way, leads the Mekubalim, for example. Right? You could say it because what's the difference? This one did Teshuvah. Yeah, this one did Teshuvah, right. This leads the Mekubalim down a fantastic rabbit hole of therefore there must be reincarnations. How therefore? Tell me how therefore. I'm not a Mekubal. I'm telling you what the Mekubalim say. How is this a proof of reincarnation? Because even if HaKadosh Baruch Hu lets it go now, at some point in time, he has to cause a person to suffer a consequence. And therefore, okay, listen, not my thing. So, back to Teshuvah. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is a God of justice, but sometimes he circumvents his own system. Remember back in the day when Apple, there was that guy, the killer in San Bernardino, remember that? And they wanted access, the FBI wanted access to Apple's phones, to the back door of Apple. this whole conversation about privacy and rights and da-da. Then you realize that a lot of systems in the world have back doors. Yes, it's supposed to be impenetrable, but there is a way around anything if you really need to know. We just spent Shabbat in our community. There was a locksmith. What'd she tell us? She said, I could break into anything. We don't tell you that because we don't make you uncomfortable. My parents once had a locksmith come to the house, an Israeli guy. They shouldn't have brought him to his house. But he came to fix their garage. And he's like, see, look, and it shows how easy it is to open up somebody else's garage. And my mom has her Lexus sitting there in the garage, and she feels that. He's like, you think your car is so impenetrable? He broke into her Lexus also. He's like, I can break into anything you have. It's like, I don't want to know that. I'm your customer. I should just fix my garage and get out of my house. Yeah, but there is, to everything in the world, there's a back door. Even to HaKadosh Baruch Hu's world, where there are supposed to be consequences, he can save from those consequences. So it's clear that Teshuvah is not the order of the world. It's not normal that a person should be able to do Teshuvah. Rather, it's chesed. It's kindness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that he allows us to do chesed. And about HaKadosh Baruch Hu's hand that accepts Baalei Teshuvah, it says, Ki mincha peshuta lekabed shavim elecha bechonev. We're going to say these pesukim now. Rabbi Albo go and organize these things. We are saying that HaKadosh Baruch Hu's hand accepts people to do Teshuvah. Hapoteach yad, we say in Mondays and Thursdays in Tachanunim, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu opens up his hand to accept people to do Teshuvah. What does that mean? Which hand? Say our rabbis, Hi Mino, that's his right hand, Midat HaRachamim, the aspect of kindness. Ve'en kan hamakom, and this is not the place, but if you would like the place, please go look at Zohar, Parashat Bereshit. That's what Rabbi Chaim Halevy sends you down to go look at the Zohar. So far, we have a question. The question is, how does Teshuvah work? So the first part of our answer is just to explain that Teshuvah is a chesed. It's not something we deserve, but it's something that HaKadosh Baruch Hu does that bypasses the normal order of the world. If you'll give me permission, I want to read one more section with you, at least. Yes? At least this part I will.
Question.
Yes.
If this is something that Hashem always does, couldn't you just say that that is the normal? I mean, I'm playing semantics, but
HaKadosh Baruch Hu does it for a person who does Teshuvah. I'll give you an example. I don't know if it's a good example, but it's an example. I think it just came to my mind. Police departments, very often, especially in various dangerous places, have these once a month where any person who has an illegal firearm could bring their illegal firearm and surrender it there, and nothing, no questions asked, nobody will say anything, nobody will do anything, you'll never get in trouble for it. Because they do this every month, does that now mean that it's okay to illegally own firearms? I'm sure that one could argue you're enabling people, right? This is part of the conversation. You can shoot people, and then every month you give up the gun. And by the way, the terrible part of this is when they surrender the weapon, they don't take any records about who gave the weapon. So let's say they find the murder weapon. All of a sudden, this is the murder weapon they're looking for from 2 weeks ago. They have nothing they can do with it. I'm sure there are also backdoors to that, but for the most part, this is the part. If they go to arrest somebody who gave in their illegal firearm, what ends up happening is that people will stop coming to give these things. So that's part of the give or take of these programs. So you could say, listen, this happens every month, so it must be that it's okay. It's not. You would still accept that this is a once a month, no penalty day that these kind of things happen. There's a place once in a certain Jewish community, I don't want to mention where a big person was caught cheating on their taxes. And the IRS seems to have realized that it was such a big problem that they allowed a certain grace period for anybody who came forward from that community to say that they cheated on their taxes, that they wouldn't be penalized as long as they would come clean to the IRS and pay back their back taxes that they owed, without any prison time or any court time or anything like that. That doesn't mean that therefore it's okay to steal. It just means that there are times where Teshuvah or Midat HaRachamim is at play, because that's what ultimately HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants. It's a good question. So let's say one more phrase, and that is Teshuvah okeret hachet legamre. Teshuvah, before we figure out how it works, you need to know that Teshuvah doesn't forgive a sin. What does it mean, forgiving a sin? They're talking now in the government about loan forgiveness. Yes? I'm not speaking about politics now. When we say, for example, imagine a person owes a credit card. At a certain point, they don't pay their credit card. So what does the credit card company do? They try to reach some kind of settlement with the person. There's a legal word for this. There's a better word. And so let's say they owe, I'm going to give an example. They owe $1,000 on their credit card. The company says, you know what, for $250, we'll let it slide. So a person pays $250. What does it do to their credit report? It tanks it, but it also says, hey, listen, this person's settled. What does it mean, settled? If they would have paid $1,000, it would have disappeared. Maybe. If they would have paid $250, it says, listen, he paid something, but it wasn't good enough. There's a difference between forgiveness and what Teshuvah does. Teshuvah doesn't forgive. Teshuvah okeret. It uproots the sin entirely. It's gone. It disappears. אחריו בעל העיקרים משיב על שאלה זאת תשובה פילוסופית נאה. The Baal Karim, Rabbi Yosef Albo, he answers this question with a very nice philosophical answer. והיא לדעתנו הטובה מכל מה שנאמר בתשובה השאלה הזאת. And to me, Rabbi Chaim says, Rabbi Yosef Albo's answer to how Teshuvah works is the best or the nicest of all the answers he's seen about Teshuvah. Vihi, page Kuf Tzadichet. כי כל מעשה שיגונה עליו האדם וישובח. יגונה עליו האדם וישובח. Anything that a person does, that they're praised for or they're held accountable for. מותנהו בשני תנאים. A person's actions that they'll be held responsible for, whether positive or negative, are dependent on two things. Aleph, ratzon, will. Bet, hakara. What is hakara? Consciousness or intent. Will and intent. These are two things that every person needs to be held responsible for their actions. ולכן, therefore, פטור השיכור מעונש גם בבית דין של מטה. כי אף שעשה את מעשיו ברצון גמור, הרי שחסרה אצלו הכרה. A drunk person who does something wrong, on a certain level, can say, I was acting, in America you have this, it's called an insanity plea of sorts. What? For that moment, I don't know that it applies to drunk people in this country, but at that point, a person says, I did something, I'm not telling you I didn't do it, but I did it without any, I didn't want to do it. I didn't have any thought, intent when I was doing it. And what about a person who is forced to do something? Patur gam hu ma'onesh, gam b'vedin shel mata, is not held accountable even in an earthly court. So if someone is forced to sign something under duress, does that hold water in court? If I can prove that I signed a contract with a gun to my head, am I obligated to that contract? No, right? But I did it, and I had intention. I mean, I was there. I was conscious when I did it. But what was missing in my action? The will to do it. I didn't want to do it. Even though he was completely conscious when he did it, there was metal to his head. But the desire, the will was gone. So we need will and intent when committing a crime. Those two things are necessary in order to be held accountable for a crime. When a person does teshuvah, now their final action is showing what their first action really meant. Let me explain. What is teshuvah? Let's remember the Rambam we studied years ago, the laws of teshuvah. That the sinner will abandon his sin. So step one, in order to do teshuvah, you have to stop sinning, right? You can't keep doing avirot while, it's like Mark Twain said, that he quit smoking between every cigarette. That's not called quitting smoking, because right now you're not smoking. So I did my 30-day diet in 3 hours. It's nice that but at the end of the day, it's not a 30-day diet, correct? So the first thing, to stop doing a chet. A person has to feel bad about what they did. And you have to verbally confess that which we said. That was Halakhot Teshuvah, chapter 2, Halakha 2. So now understand, says Rabbi Chaim Halevy, based on Rabbi Yosef Albo, that charata, regret, that word, regret, is the main component that makes the mechanism of Teshuvah work. And let me explain. שכן כיצד אנו יודעים אם אדם עשה מעשה מתוך רצון והכרה גם יחד? How do we know today if a person acted then both with intent and with desire, with will? Now we're asking him after the fact. A person says, I don't regret what I did. When you ask a person, do you know what you just did? Yes, and I would do it again. What is that person telling you? Did they have intent when they did what they did? Yes. Did they desire to do what they did? Yes. So, what is there to talk about? The person is guilty. But when we talk to a person, when a person says, I regret what I did, now proves that back then, he didn't really intend to do an avera. Or his consciousness that he was doing an avera was not clear. Meaning, sure he wanted to do an avera, but even then he was struggling. Even then a person was debating. The person didn't... When I do teshuvah, I'm saying, Kadosh Baruch Hu, I feel so bad about what I did. That's why all of these teachings of Chachamim, a person does not do a chet unless a ruach shtut comes in there. We're trying to show, if I can show you that you were insane at the moment of committing the crime, then I could get you off the hook. Now, pleading insanity, let me explain to you something. I mentioned firearms, I'll explain to you a law. Here's a law. In this country, everyone is innocent until proven guilty. Yes? Someone breaks, let's say, Bob breaks into Jack's house. Jack shoots Bob and kills him. Who's the criminal here? Bob, right? He broke into the house. But who's really the criminal here in America? Jack. Why? The police come. There's one guy holding a gun with somebody else dead. That makes him guilty. Now, what does he do? He pleads the fifth and talks to his lawyer.
I was going to say, not necessarily. So simple, it was dark. You don't see the guy you were fearing for your life.
But no, wait, that's not true. Now, to come to court, in court he has two choices. Either admit that you're guilty, Jack killed Bob, or say, I didn't kill Bob. Now, if one says, I didn't kill Bob, if Jack said, I didn't kill Bob, and they test the fingerprint, all this, and they've proved that Jack killed Bob, so what is Jack now? He's a liar. So, what does Jack do? The reason Jack killed Bob, Oren? Self-defense. In order to plead self-defense, a person must first plead guilty. You cannot enter a self-defense plea on a non-guilty charge. If you didn't do it, why are you pleading self-defense? Meaning, the gamble that a person who defends themselves takes is, they will first have to admit that they're guilty, and then they'll explain why they did what they did and hope that a judge or a jury, whoever else, agrees. But there is no way out of the guilty if a person that is not able to prove that it was self-defense, all that's left for the court to deal with is guilty. And guilty is a really bad thing to be when it comes to murder. And so, the same with teshuvah. If a person says, in order for a person to do teshuvah, I was crazy when I did it, I did it wrong, a person has to first plead guilty. I was going to tell you this because of an insanity plea. There's another way to get out of a murder charge in this country. And that is to plead insanity. What does insanity mean?
I don't know what I was doing.
Right? People think it's like because they were mentally unstable. A person mentally unstable, even now their plea might not even count, because if they're not competent to stand trial, so they might not, you can't take a person who's not competent to stand trial. When a person has insanity, it's very common, by the way, that a person will kill someone else in self-defense and will literally blank on any of the details that happen. The body goes into some kind of shock. This is my wife's department, it's not my department. I don't understand much about how this works. The brain has it's like lo aleinu lo alechem, when children are hurt or abused or whatever else, when they're children, there are years of their life that are simply missing. They don't know what happened then. It's not that they've taken themselves out of this experience. It's a self-defense mechanism that a body has, niflo taboreh, though years later in life it's very difficult to deal with. But these are moments of insanity. In order to plead insanity, one first has to plead that they're guilty. The way teshuvah works, according to Rabbi Albo, is we are pleading guilty. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, chatati, aviti, pashati. I'm pleading guilty. I'm telling you, I did this chet. I'm not denying it. But what am I telling you? I'm telling you that I really didn't mean to do it. I didn't want to do it. My Yetzer Hara made me do it. my craziness, my lust for something made me do it. Whatever, enter that plea, insanity, self-defense, whatever that plea is. But the first step is to say I'm guilty. What gets me off the hook is not my guilty plea. It's not the vidui that gets me off the hook. It's the charata. It's the explanation about why I did what I did, because I wasn't fully there. I wasn't thinking straight. That's the way that Teshuvah works. Says Rabbi Chaim to Halevy, this is the most excellent answer to the question. Now we are only 3 pages into a 10-page essay. So clearly there are many more things that Rabbi Chaim Halevy wants to tell us. Being the posek that he is, the beginning of next week's class, he's going to walk us through where else in halakha charata works. Not just in a spiritual understanding of Teshuvah, but I'm going to ask you to think about hatarat nedarim. If you can do research between now and next Thursday, how does hatarat nedarim work? How do I promise something? And then I come in front of 3 chachamim, and I tell them, Shimuna Rabotai, listen to me, rabbis and gentlemen, I don't wish to hold up to my end of the bargain, and and there are 2 concepts. One is called charata, and one is called, you can be matir neder in 2 ways. Charata. Who here learned nedarim? You learn nedarim, no? Itai, you learn nedarim? No? Nobody here knows nedarim?
Oh no.
I think two things. Number one, you say that
Petach and charata. Those are the words.
Yeah, you have to say that had you known the you.
Wait, Pam, don't take away my class next week. I want them to. Pam doesn't have to do research. She already knows the answer. For you, you're going to research 2 terms: petach and charata. The 2 different ways to annul a vow. That's going to be very important to understanding Rabbi Chaim Halevy's question next week. And part of that is going to then come back to Teshuvah and show you exactly why charata works, even when it comes to things that happen between us and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But until then, thank you for learning with him. B'ezrat Hashem.